Having been in partnerships for the vast majority of my career, I've seen how difficult it can be to manage complex partner marketing programs and then prove the value within an organization. It's not knowing the what that is actually creating your pipeline. You create partner portals, give your partners materials to use in sales cycles, but you have no insight into if they use it, or if so, what they use or how they use it. I've built up MDF programs where you fund initiatives from your partners, but lack any transparency into what those dollars actually produced for you. You ask the partner, since they control the reporting, and oftentimes you get back vague sentiments of influence. And oftentimes, partner marketing is on an island, expected to set the strategy, collaborate with partners, and then execute all those programs and initiatives. So while creating dashboards to prove the value of your program is important, it tends to fall somewhere around 20th position in your to-do list. Well, today I am joined by two partner leaders who have navigated these ambiguous waters of partner marketing attribution and have some insights on how to make the ambiguous more clear and concrete. Today I'm joined by Shelly Kulesza, VP of Services here at Inverta. Shelly has worked with companies large and small, both as an internal employee and on the consulting side, as well, to build and execute successful partner programs. Ben McGill, EVP of Strategic Business Development at Turtle, has helped marketers navigate these waters through the use of enablement tools like Turtle itself. But before I turn it over to them, I have just a few bits of housekeeping. One, if you have questions throughout today's session, please feel free to put them in the Q&A section to the right-hand side of the screen. And two, we will definitely be sending out the recording and slides following today's session. So please check your inboxes tomorrow and feel free to share the insights with your team. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Shelly and Ben for today's conversation.
Appreciate that, Jessica. You know, there are so many things that affect a partner pipeline. And in today's webinar, we would like to narrow down in on the role of content and how content actually plays a way in driving smarter revenue for your partner channel on both the services side as well as the technology side. And to anchor us to that conversation, we're going to start out by talking about where the systems typically break down. We are also going to talk about the delivery mechanism around that, as well as the reporting side. So with that, I'm going to move us to the next slide. And this emulates what I just talked about, which is content, delivery, and reporting being those three areas of breakdown. And I'd like to focus on the content side of things. I think most of us are familiar with partner programs, and the way they provide assets is typically either through a partner portal. They may have a shared link that they send out where all their assets live. Or you may even be sending those via an email with just links as assets become available to your partners. And I think that those assets are pretty static. They are rarely built for a specific partner. They are rarely built with a specific go-to-market story that is joint. They are typically built in a way that the partner's just able to co-brand, and there's no personalization of any kind. And I think that that is where the problem sits, is in the infrastructure of how you think about that content and how it's actually built to be meaningful to the prospect that you and your partner are trying to attract. So that being the anchor, I think the next problem falls down in delivery. So Ben, I wonder if you can address that.
Absolutely. Thanks, Shelly. I mean, I think we tend to see some major challenges in delivery nowadays, right? And the main premise of the problem here is that it's not a one-size-fits-all motion anymore, right? The vast majority of OEMs have centrally produced content, and every partner uses the same assets right, for all of their prospects. Yet, of course, we know that those prospects and those target customers are not the same, right? So that's the first big challenge we see around delivery. And the second thing is that we live in a digital first world now, right? So the vast majority of these first touch points for these prospects are digital, and yet we are still sending very static, underwhelming content. For the most part, this is a PDF, and for those of us that will remember, the PDF is just over 30 years old now, not necessarily the vehicle that's offering the premium experience that brands want to offer prospects when they go through those early touch points, right? So those are, I think, two key points around delivery. And then the third aspect around reporting is that we see thousands of documents in circulation, and yet no one can tell us whether there's been any engagement on those assets or not. Surely in 2026, that's no longer acceptable. And I think the second point in relation to reporting that is really becoming front of mind for a lot of businesses in this space is that the funding, and then specifically here, the MDF funding, is now going to be contingent on attribution. So what I mean by that is that there are vast sums of money that a lot of businesses access, and they use that to invest in their partner channels. And that's a key component to their growth strategy. But without being able to attribute or report on the success of those programs that you're running, where content is at the heart of it, it's going to become a lot harder to be able to access. And that's where the system breaks from that perspective.
I think, too, to build on that, Ben, reporting is really a way that you can tell whether the other two pieces are working from a content delivery standpoint, because without that visibility into engagement, you're just guessing at which assets might be worth investing in, or guessing which partners might need some additional support, or even guessing where those MDF dollars went and whether they were actually effective or not. So I think that that's really a key there as it relates to reporting.
Absolutely.
If we move on, I think next we probably want to talk about, like, what do we do about those things? And from a content perspective, I think that this is really about a shift to personalization, not just at the partner level, but at an account level. And today, most partners, like I said, they're getting that one static asset and they're putting their logo on it, and they're calling that, partner co-marketing. And I think that you have to fix the content built around the partner's specific customer target, around their market, so that, for example, a partner selling into healthcare is going to get a different experience than somebody who's selling into financial services. Two very different markets that I think you have to address. And I know that there are some scalability issues, especially as the budgets are tight and resources are tight. So I think that that's just a big part, and something that we can unlock as we continue to have this conversation and show you some ways to do that. Ben, do you want to talk about delivery?
Yeah, thanks, Shelly. I mean, I think delivery again is an area where we're seeing enormous levels of change as businesses grapple with trying to address the right solution. And I think what we're seeing consistently with the winners is that they are moving towards more scalable, flexible, modular, and highly interactive and engaging formats that also allow for content to then be personalized and tailored appropriately. So you reference the importance of being able to do that for partners as well as target accounts. We're seeing businesses starting to adapt their programs to facilitate this, and not just for one-to-one programs, but also doing this in a digital manner that allows them to send thousands of targeted assets out to key accounts in a hyper personalized manner. Right, those are the types of programs that we're seeing the winners redesign, implement, and roll out. The second thing that I would say in relation to delivery is that content is always changing, and there's always inherent need to update that. So this concept of always on and updating on the fly is now essential. A lot of these businesses have high volumes of assets in circulation, so the ability to keep what is in circulation up to date is now becoming essential for these businesses going forward, right? So those are like, I think, the key points across delivery. If I think of reporting, really the main criteria to focus on here is measurement, right? We need to have a very clear and critical understanding of how our content is performing. Right? We can no longer get away from just having basic metrics in place. What we need to understand is exactly how the content is performing, so that as we evolve the program, right, and as we consider how prospects are engaging in the content, we can improve and iterate as we go, right? We can better understand how various accounts are engaging in the content, how the partners are engaging, what's working, what's not working, and through this process, we can build a program of activity to improve and iterate over time. And the final thing I'll say on reporting that's now becoming critically important as well is the fact that we have to tie what we invest across content to pipeline and revenue. So all of these assets that are being accessed, can we then go and tie this to pipeline and revenue? And if we're measuring that correctly, we can then start to attribute this far more accurately. So I think those are some of the key things that I would flag in relation to reporting, Shelly. Then if we move to the next slide, what I would say here is, obviously this is all about proving pipeline impact. But, what I would tend to tell a lot of people is that you can't run a program anymore that you can't measure, right? Any program you're running now has to grant you with the data and the insight to report back. And what I would also say is something that's becoming far more consistent in terms of what we see in the market is that a lot of MDF funding is starting to become conditional on CFOs being able to see this level of transparency, right? So when you think about what your CFO needs in terms of attribution, and what your CRO needs to understand the role that content is playing in helping with their pipeline, that becomes essential to how we prove pipeline impact. And I think that's essential. I'm not sure what you think, Shelly.
Yeah, I mean, I think to add to that, when your performance rolls up every partner instead of it sitting in siloed separate reports that you're cobbling together, you can really see in real time which partners and accounts are actually driving movement, which is really important because that means you can shift your attention and your MDF dollars toward what's working while the program is actually running. So I think that is also ahead of those prospect conversations, which is really critical. I think as we move on, it's really important and it's hard to see. We've talked a lot about content, delivery mechanisms, and reporting, but I do think the proof is in the pudding. Like you have to actually see it working so that it pulls all these things together and you can actually understand what it is that we're talking about. So what we'd like to do is, Ben, I'm going to hand it over to you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and have you share your screen so you can actually show us what this looks like in real life.
Yeah. Thank you, Shelly. So I thought it might be quite helpful for the audience. Hopefully you can see my screen now. I thought it might be quite helpful for the audience if I just show a couple of practical examples of how businesses are taking that approach that Shelly has outlined, where they are re-architecting how they set up content programs and how they facilitate this for their partners and their through the channel. And I'm going to show you two examples. One where I can show you how you can manually create a personalized document just to understand the premise of what these businesses are doing. And then secondly, what I will also show is an example where businesses are using this to address scale, because obviously it's great that we can create documents that are somewhat personalized, but actually the real value here is being able to do this at scale for a much larger percentage of your channel or the TAM that you serve, right? And some of the programs that Shelly and her team are designing and orchestrating are designed with that in mind, right? Which is leveraging technology to be able to access a larger percentage of your TAM. So in this case, what I'm going to do is just show you a couple of programs where we have a couple of reputable businesses where typically there is an OEM and there is a partner and they go to market together. And one of the gripes is that, we don't always represent the partner well within the material. And so what you can see within this document here is a document that's about 6 chapters long. And then on this first page, you can see that there are some parameters and some provisions for what we call personalization tokens. So these are all areas where they felt that there's a need to personalize or tailor the content. But you could see that this asset is very, very clearly articulated that this is a go-to-market motion for both of these businesses. However, what they recognize is that within this asset, there is a requirement to be able to personalize, right? So if I go and click on here, they've determined that these are the parameters that they wish to tailor or personalize this content by for this particular program of activity. So in these examples, it's worth thinking about, the audience, it's going to the industry, maybe the pain points, maybe the challenges they face, as well as key important information about your business or your contact people, or references, in this particular case studies and those types of things, right? So what I'll do now is I'll show you what this looks like when it's been completed. So we'll just move over to this page, and I've pre-populated these assets with the information that I want. And by clicking on one button, technology is able to go off to the master document, create the asset. Let's just close this off. Go to that master asset, and from the fields that we've completed, we now have created a derivative version of that for our target persona at the green company with the date. And then as we go through this asset, all of those parameters that we've completed are now all set, ready to go, right? So very, very quickly, although this is a relatively basic example, what it's showing is how I can create highly tailored, personalized content and do so for a particular audience, like very, very quickly. And of course, because this is a digital asset, we can also track that, and I'll get to that at the end of the demonstration. So that's the first example. The second example I'm going to show you is something that demonstrates scale. So if we have a look at this example, the same premise applies, where you have an OEM and they have an awful lot of content that they share with their channel and distribution partners. Now, the reality is, as we know, we don't always need to send all of that information to our target accounts. What's really important is we send the right information to the right person at the right time. That is what we are all trying to achieve. And so this motion that Shelly has helped me articulate today is the winners are allowing businesses to run these programs very easily. So if you understand your audience and you want to access a larger percentage of your TAM and you want to do that efficiently, then you can go and design these programs and allow the content to do that for you. So in this particular case, as I said, we have a long asset here, and within this asset, there are lots of personalization parameters. So you can see here that there's parameters for the customer's name. They've even decided that they want to pull through the homepage so that it looks more familiar. There's provision for the channel partner. There's an About Us section, and then there's a whole lot of information in relation to whether a prospect target is global or local, because that has an impact in terms of how they communicate and the language they use. And then they break down the rest of the content relevancy based on sector and then products and service lines. So once you've got that, that's a lot of content, right? And so what we do is we make it easy to be able to assemble those assets really quickly. So what I'm going to do now is show you how I can do that at scale. But before I do that, I'm just going to give you an example, because as an operator, you're going to have a lot of intelligence sitting within your marketing automation platform or sitting within a CRM. And so the purpose of this is, once you've designed these programs, is there are technologies which will allow you to go in and access that data. So if we just use this as an example, what you've got here is some fields, and all of these fields correlate with those personalization tokens that I've shown you on the document. And now we need to get that into these assets, right? So the way we do that is as follows. I go down here and I select batch personalization. This takes me to the next stage of the process. I go and select a few features. I grab that file that I've just shown you. So I'll quickly go here and I'll quickly grab that file and I'll pull that through. And what the system does is it looks at that master document and it then correlates what we've just shown you, which is all of those tokens and those correlate with the corresponding CSV fields I showed you on the sheet. And then what it presents here is an example value, which in theory is the output, right? So those assets have all been copied across, and we have the right information and the right product sets. Now, within that file I shared with you, what I was also able to do is, because I'm showing you how we do this at scale, is just simply through that file, you can support 20,000 rows within a CSV file. So in theory, I can create 20,000 unique documents within a couple of minutes. I think in this file, there's about 120 odd assets. So I'll click on continue. We then go in and agree the relevant GDPR rules and local data in each region, whether you be in California or wherever you might be. And then within a couple of seconds, the technology has followed the rules that you've set, and it has created 124 versions of that asset ready for those target accounts. And so let's go across and see what that looks like in real practice. And so what we can see through this tab is it's starting to pull through all of those assets, right? So what was a generic asset with placeholders, we now have digital versions, derivatives of those master documents that are highly tailored, highly specific for these key target accounts. So these channel partners now actually have content that are ready to go out to those prospects. And let's go in now and have a look and see what one of those documents actually looks like. So if I click on here, and we'll just select this example, firstly, what we'll notice is we've gone from 16 or 17 chapters to something that's highly targeted, right? We've only got 8 sections. All of those key parameters on the front page have changed. So we've got the OEM, we've got the distribution partner, we've got logos, we've got home pages. And as you go through this asset, what you can see is actually all of those parameters have been changed. And this is now ready to go out to the prospect. There's video, content, there's good imagery. So, you know, all of this can be coordinated and orchestrated with the team at Inverta, but this is just an example of how you can create this. And then, of course, as I said earlier, the great thing about this is because this is a digital format, we are now able to track the engagement on the assets. And I'm just going to show you a little bit about what that looks like. So if we just move over here, high-level reportings, instead of me looking at open and clicks, now I can come down and I can start to look at how many readers, what is the average read time, what is the total read time. I can look at how often people are reading the asset, what days were they busy reading the asset, and I can start to look at the various scores on those assets. And then, of course, if I want to look a little bit more detail, I can then start to look at over what periods they have consumed the content. And then the final thing is, obviously, in the case of personalized content, what I'm really interested in is I sent it to that prospect. Has anyone there actually read the asset? Well, guess what? I can go in and show them this. I can come down here and I can see that Ivan has been into the asset. He's read it 4 times for an average read time of just under 4 minutes. He shared it once. What I can also see is that the dates that he came in and read it. So it helps me manage, you know, when did I distribute it and over what period has Ivan gone back in to read the asset. And then I can also see that of the content I shared with him, it looks like he's consumed 78% of it. So that would infer that there's a high degree of engagement in the content. And then the final thing is I can then go down and see which chapters and which areas of the assets, or which product lines, which service lines, what areas, what pain points are relevant to Ivan or his buying group or whoever it may be that we distributed to that content. So we have a wealth of insight here. This is really powerful for you in terms of your relationship with the commercial team, because you can tell them who's in market. But as I said earlier, this is hugely exciting because it allows you to attribute the content investment that you're making into who is engaging and the role that that plays in pipeline and revenue. So hopefully that live demo was helpful.
I think it was. I really appreciate you walking us through that. And in order to wrap us up, I think what I'd like to do is go back to the slide that has those 3 familiar scenarios that Jessica prompted us with at the very beginning of the webinar. And if I need to share that, hold on one second.
There you go.
Thank you. Perfect. And the first one is really about leveraging this type of solution in order to show that you've got pipeline moving. I think we could all agree that what Ben walked us through is actually going to help us see how partner touch points are rolling up to actual pipeline, not only by account, but by the partner that's driving that activity and the program that's driving that activity, so that we can actually get ahead of a lot of those questions from our CRO that are, what is the channel actually doing to help our pipeline growth? Ben, you want to take the last two?
Absolutely. Thanks, Shelley. For me, the second point is really clear. This is all now about having visibility of pipeline and attribution of your MDF spend, right? So through the launch of the right program, you can now attribute your MDF spend across all of your engagement metrics. You can tie that to pipeline and revenue, and you can make internal cases for investment so much easier. And then the final point is simply by redesigning and architecting a more modular and scalable content program, you can now successfully go and service hundreds or thousands of partners with hyper-personalized content. You can do that at scale, and you can do that with modest resources and within manageable cost investments. So if we transition from here, the thing I would say that you can probably gather from the thread that Shelley and I have covered is the pace of change is rapid. It's led by innovation. We're solving the same problems, albeit through slightly different means. But the need for insight and greater efficiency is never been higher, and all of you will know that. This is an incredibly exciting time for those of us operating in the channel space. We've certainly been hugely excited to be a part of it, and I think now would be a great time to open up some Q&A to our audience.
Thank you so much, Shelley and Ben, for sharing your insights today. I really appreciate it. And I'm sure that our audience did as well. I think it's safe to say that we can all agree that partner marketing and partner enablement is not an easy task. But fortunately, as you guys have outlined, there are ways to help surface the impact that partners have on your company's revenue and, in fact, improve it through personalization and those sorts of things. So I want to thank all of you for joining us today. And please keep an eye out for our recording, which I can promise you will be in your inboxes by early, or if you're in the UK, late your day tomorrow. So thank you all so very much.
Thank you.